So I'm gonna talk more about the Democrats and the Republicans, and I'm gonna talk about religion. So for the Democrats, it's like one out of every five is atheist or agnostic, from what I'm seeing. For the Republicans, it's like one out of every 20. Um, I identify as agnostic. I can explain why, um, and I'm gonna go into religion and stuff, and talk about the major religion and the other ones, the one that it's like, talk about Christianity, what it stemmed from, talk about Islam, and the other major stuff. I'll touch on like Buddhism, Hindu, um, and maybe like ancestral stuff. But now a difference that I'm noticing, that I feel like is happening with the Republicans and the Democrats as far as their agnostic and atheist population. It's more of like a law and order seeking atheist population amongst the Republicans that are like siding with these people that are making excuses for terrorism. I can go into that, but these people that aren't actively trying to establish a terrorist kingdom, but they're making excuses for the ones that existed in the past, you know, it opposed to like the Democrat side, which is, yeah, there are more atheists and agnostics, but they're like, it's like the nihilist anarchist types, like the the savage ones, like, the swindlers and the, stuff like that. So like, literally the left, like, I'm gonna post a video talking about the definition of the left and right. um from talking to AI, the definition of the left is literally anarchy. Like, pure left is just straight anarchy. So like, if you're heading more left, you're heading towards anarchy, like making excuses for everything, and not allowing people to establish law and government and all that kind of stuff. So so the right would just be the opposite of that, which is law and order, and like actually having laws, believing them to be objectively true, explaining them, that kind of stuff. So when you talk about these left, agnostics and atheists and stuff, they're more, it seems like they're more savage and stuff, and just like anarchist and stuff like that. And the right ones are more like, law and order types. Now, there might be less of them on the right and more of them on the left. Well, maybe just a lot of people turn like pessimistic or whatever once they get away from religion or something, But I didn't do that. That's not a logical thing to do. A lot of religious people are pessimistic as well. You know what I mean? So people that claim that they're religious and maybe don't follow it properly, or maybe the religion itself is pessimistic. I don't know if that's the right word. I mean, like, nihilistic, and like a bleak outlook and on life and stuff and existence, and maybe savage or suicidal or angry, or stupid stuff like that. I mean, if you look at these like, okay, if you, I was gonna say, if you look at these like crazy, um, these like suicidal attacks and like crazy reckless attacks, it seems like it's mostly on the left. Those kind of angry, bleak outlook psychopaths. Um, and they might be like atheist or agnostic a lot of the time, but the proper religion would be, agnosticism. Okay, and I can explain that. So like, but you also have to be a loving person. The proper religion might be atheism. I don't know. I can't really explain that, but agnosticism will be a stepping stone to atheism. It's just, can you explain the principle of there being no creator? Stuff like that. Consciousness arising from unconscious matter and stuff like that. Like, explaining that kind of stuff would lead to atheism. But so yeah, the Democrats might have more atheists and agnostics, but it doesn't seem like they're well behaved. And the Republicans have some, and I've found groups of them. Now it's so the Democrats, they have a lot of Christians and Jews and stuff and Muslims as well. Most of their representatives are, of those categories, and you know, so it's when it comes to these Republicans, like, you, oh, 19 out of 20 are these terrorist sympathizers, and they might be trying to install this terrorist kingdom again, you know, but most of them are like chameleonized, that they're patriotic, and they act like the Bible condones the United States government structure with the laws in place, and like the freedoms and stuff. Okay, the Bible doesn't say that kind of stuff. It doesn't say that it. The Bible excuses the old terrorist kingdom. Okay, democracies weren't created, right after the time of Jesus. It was just more terrorist kingdoms, but they were labeled Christian instead of Jewish. So like, the character Jesus in the Bible, never condemned the terrorism of the Jews amongst their and I can explain what this terrorism is that I'm talking about. But they're like chameleonized, so it's like so it's like 1 in 20 of these Republicans might be agnostics or atheists that are like basically like voting in the same party as these terrorist sympathizers, like idiots. Um, you know what I mean? Like these people that talk about like not understanding what's going on and just having faith in something, and going around saying they believe it and stuff. Like actual idiots like that. So these terrorist sympathizers, um, they're voting. These agnostics and atheists would be voting in the same party, but it's not like they're voting along with terrorist sympathizers trying to bring it back to the theocratic monarchy, or whatever it would be called, like like we established our nation to get away from. Like the British monarchy that still exists. Okay. And I'm pretty sure the British king is literally a descendant or relative or whatever of the British king that we fought against to establish this nation. And the Japanese emperor, if you want to talk about monarchs and emperors and stuff, they're a descendant of the Japanese emperor that we had to fight against and bomb, and like stuff like that. So like, our supposed greatest allies, their rulers are descendants of the people that we have had to go to war against. Japan is one of our most powerful allies. Britain is one of our most powerful allies, as well as Australia and Canada. Britain, the monarchy, is recognized by Australia and Canada. They're subjects of Britain. Okay. And maybe other places. I mean, I don't know what's going on in France, but that's another one. Germany. Looking at these kind of places, what's going on. But stuff like that. Anyways, I could talk more about that another time. Like who our ideological allies are. If it would be like maybe South Korea, Taiwan, on paper, maybe South American nations, Central American, like they actually have like maybe the same democratic structure as us with the same branches and stuff like that. It just might be corrupt, like corrupted by cartels and stuff like that, whatever. But anyways, with this religion stuff and the parties, um, it's more of a chameleonized like Christianity than it was before. So like, yeah, these agnostics would be voting alongside of a bunch of Christians because they're more inclined towards law and order, you know, than the Democrat side. And it's not like they're voting alongside Christians trying to create a Christian monarchy. They're voting alongside Christians that have like chameleonized to this like Freemason influence and stuff like that. So it's different now. The Democrat side, they still have Christians and stuff. They seem to be more anarchists. So those atheists and agnostics might be like whatever. I can't think of the terms right now, but bleak kind of people, savage, evil. So it's like they would also be voting alongside Christians and stuff. Maybe less of them, but it's like a bunch of savage, manipulative kind of Christians, like more hypocritical and not really going for law and order and stuff, as opposed to the right, which would be like, yeah, they're stupid and they're making excuses for terrorism, historical terrorism, but it's a different crowd. So I just wanted to talk about religious differences between the Democrats and Republicans, and just because the Democrats might, on paper have the proper, like a higher statistic of the proper religious group, it doesn't mean that it's a well-behaved crowd amongst that religious group. It's more of like it seems to be more of a nihilistic agnostic crowd, savage agnostic crowd, than like a loving, law and order seeking, objective morality believing agnostic crowd, which would align Republican because it's a safer party to vote with. When it comes to the policies and the comparison of the corruption and stuff like that. So Democrats more agnostics, from what it seems. Republicans less. But what kind of agnostics are these? What kind of Christians are these on the Democrat side, the Republican side, or Muslims or Jews or whatever? Democrat, literally the meaning of left, from what I've talked about with the AI and stuff, and it just seems obvious, is anarchist. Meaning of right is law and order seeking. And so it'd just be like some anarchist agnostics and Christians or whatever, savage ones, and then some law and order seeking agnostics and Christians and stuff. Yeah, the Christians are dumb. They go around saying they believe in something they can't explain. It really is a dumb, it's not anything like excusable, it's a really dumb thing. So, like they would have to think that the word Christian means something that it doesn't. Yeah, I believe Christianity is real, but they think Christianity is just the word for a watermelon. You know what I mean? Like, I can go into that. I don't want you to be some kind of mean person acting like I'm not comprehensive and trying to distract and manipulate and make false accusations and that kind of stuff. I am comprehensive. What I've said has been comprehensive. Okay. I can go in to explain these things. I'm willing to communicate. I understand the necessity of it. Okay, I don't make excuses for people. Okay, whether I've talked to you or not, you know, you still need to be a good person. But I understand that it could be helpful, you know, communication, articulation. I understand the necessity. I do try. Again, I'm comprehensive. Don't try to make false accusations. Don't try to oppress loving people. Okay, I'm not one of these people that go and sympathize with terrorism. Okay, I'm not one of these Christians. Okay, yeah, I'm voting Republican, but I'm not like that. Okay, I'm telling you, this Democrat crowd of agnostics and stuff, they don't seem good. Okay. So I'm just telling you what's going on here. Okay. So to explain how Christianity is terrorism historically, and you know, based on what the Bible says and stuff. So you have terrorism towards your own people, and you have, you know, outward terrorism towards others. Now, Christianity comes from Judaism. Judaism commanded for, you know, the blasphemers of God and the unbelievers within the congregation and stuff to be murdered. Okay? So that's terrorism. So, like, think of children born into Israel. Okay? They would be subjected to the threat of murder if they didn't want to go around saying that all that stuff's okay and true and that they believe it and stuff. Okay, now you can't do that. As that child, you can't go around saying all that stuff's good. Okay, you can't side with evil just because you're being pressured. You understand that? So these children would be subjected to terrorist threats. Okay, the threat of being murdered. Now, if an outside nation saw that, you know, and wanted to protect these children, you know, people that were born into it, they didn't agree to it, they didn't come up with a religion, you know, they didn't create this manipulative money grab. If they wanted to come protect these children and this world from that kind of governance, the Jews would fight against that. Like, they would be outward terrorists, okay? They would be inward terrorists threatening to murder the people born into it or the people that don't want to be a part of it. They would be outward terrorists threatening to murder the people that are coming to try to protect the people within their nation that don't want to be a part of it. You know, and there's an example in the Bible of the Jews going and, you know, they came to these nations and they're like, hey, you can either be our slaves or we're going to take you over. You know, what kind of proposition is that? Like, how is that not terrorism? You know, how is that? How do they try to explain that? They just come up to somebody, hey, you can either be our slaves or we're going to come kill all of you. Like, every single one of you, woman and child, maybe. Like, so obviously Judaism's terrorism. Okay, they don't explain the religion. They don't claim to be able to explain the religion. They talk about faith and stuff. Like, it's horrible. So they're murdering people over something that they don't even claim that they're able to explain. You know, because it's made up. And they demand money. They demand, you know, admiration and, you know, all that's like, it's horrible. So they demand you to show up on Sundays or whatever on the Sabbath and like all that. Like, you can't do certain things. And they literally cut off a piece of male genitalia. They mutilate infant males. There's no medical necessity besides trying to avoid phimosis for circumcision, from what I'm aware of. Maybe some other types of things, but it's not something that is supposed to be done. Like, we've evolved to have foreskin for a reason, and they literally mutilate infant children. So the Christians, it stems from Judaism. The Christians go around excusing all that stuff, okay? And then the Christian kingdoms were doing the same thing. You know, the heretics were murdered. If people were going around saying God's not real and stuff like that, or trying to, you know, they were murdered. So, Jesus never went around saying, hey, don't do that, okay? In the Bible, okay, he went excusing that stuff historically, and then he didn't tell them not to do it anymore, so they did keep doing it. And so yeah, it's just more terrorism. So, like, same kind of thing. These Christian terrorists are now, you know, murdering the people that don't want to be a part of it. If anybody tried to come, you know, put a stop to that, they would also be threatened with murder. Same kind of thing there. And then when you come to the Crusades and stuff like that, you know, explaining that stuff. And then the Muslim stuff, same kind of thing. You know, what happens to the apostates? You know, it's just the same kind of thing. Making excuses for the historical terrorism, current terrorism. You know, all those Christian kingdoms are gone. You know, like, the Muslim nations are, for the most part, the ones left that actually still do that kind of terrorism, as far as, like, it being actually part of the government structure. So, you know, when you talk about the war with Iran and stuff, well, look at the government structure of Iran. Look at their religious policies. Okay, like, you know, maybe somebody's not, like, it's just, even if somebody was just fined, you know, for speaking out against some false religion, like, what happens if they don't want to pay the fine? They're gonna be threatened with murder, right? Like, they're gonna be threatened with murder if they try to resist any kind of government required punishment. So, you know, that's just where it's at, where we're at. And the Democrats, you know, they're the ones that go around excusing the Hamas and, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, so when it comes to the Muslim terrorism, Democrats are the ones, you know, that's the party that they wind up in. When it comes to the Catholics, you know, like, that kind of craziness, Democrats. You know, the Catholics were, like, real, like, hypocritical and just, like, outrageous terrorists historically. You know what I mean? Like, it was the Protestant Christians that led to, you know, the Freemasons and the New World Order and stuff, and what we're at now. It wasn't the Catholics. Okay, the Catholics were trying to put a stranglehold on the terrorism, and they were trying to juice it out. You know, they're making other regulations and trying to get more money out of it, and they were just, like, being contradictory about it and stuff. And you had, like, the Martin Luther stuff and, like, other, like, Protestant Reformation stuff. Okay, we're talking about some very uneducated people back then when it comes to, like, them being agnostic and stuff as opposed to Christian. They shouldn't have been Christian. Okay, I'm not making excuses for that terrorism. I'm just saying it's different, and there are things that can help, and there are things that can influence it, but ultimately it's a choice, and you have a responsibility. So when it comes to these influences, like, yeah, education's different, stuff like that. But so like when it came to like actually following logical reasoning and stuff and being less hypocritical, you had the Protestants coming out and stuff like that. But so the Catholics are mostly Democrat from what I'm seeing. The these terrorist Muslims, these historically contradictory, more so contradictory and hypocritical and oppressive Catholics. They have Protestants, in the Democratic arena, and then you have these like kind of all-inclusive, groups like Protestants and that are basically anarchists, that are like, they condemn people for having an opinion that they're willing to, or for like trying to establish laws and stuff, it seems. So yeah, that kind of stupidity. There's stuff like the humanists and stuff. I looked into that. It's like atheists and agnostics. It's like the large, like on atheist.org or whatever, and the humanists and stuff. If you look into that stuff, it seems like a lot of it's stupid and like nihilist and anarchist and stuff like that. Manipulative, maybe savage. It's like, so. The correct thing to do is, be agnostic, or if you have a way to explain the creator stuff or whatever, be atheists. Or if you have a way to prove there's a creator, well, it's obviously not the Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu stuff or whatever. So you would be a theist or whatever you figured out. But be loving and try to establish laws and be logically consistent and stuff like that. Be fair. You're going to wind up aligning more with the Republicans because they're more inclined to that stuff. Yes, they say some really horrible, offensive things. They can be stubborn, arrogant, oppressive. They could ostracize you. They could group up with their Christian oppression and stuff. But it's not as bad as this Democrat savagery, manipulation, anarchy, like mob mentality, like mobster mentality, like gangster, freaking prostitute, freaking, like you don't want to be, you're going to align more with these Republicans that are more inclined towards law and order than these like savages, even if they are saying they're agnostic and stuff, still a savage sect of it. So, okay. I'm just thinking, I don't want you to start saying stupid stuff. A lot of the times I get accusations, especially from the Democrats, with no explanations. They just try to throw accusations, criminal, moral, try to get me punished without providing an explanation. They try to be quick and aggressive with it and, like, try to sweep it under the rug and stuff and have me locked up and, that kind of stuff. Locked up as a crazy person, locked up as some kind of criminal, like, sweep it under the rug. Don't give me a chance to explain myself. Don't let me publicize things, like, stuff like that. It's a common thing. It's a known tactic. Okay? So I am comprehensive. I am intelligent. I am willing to communicate. I do care. Okay? I don't go around making assumptions. If you notice, if you look back at my, the things that I've communicated and stuff, I say things like, I use words like, this seems to be the case, or I suspect, or I feel, or I think. I don't make assumptions. Okay? Like, I don't say things, like, I don't say I'm certain of things when I'm not. Okay? I don't act like I'm certain of things when I'm not. I don't, like, make decisions like that. Like, I am honest. Okay? and I act accordingly, and I investigate things, and someone's innocent until proven guilty and stuff, and you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. So just want you to acknowledge that. Just don't let these really oppressive, evil people try to throw false accusations at me, okay, and just try to quickly, like, smother me away. You know what I mean? I need help, okay? I need help. So, yeah, I mean, most of the nation are these terrorist sympathizers, the Christians, and they might be the chameleonized version. And then, like, you got Christians on both sides, but, like, what kind, you know? There are a bunch of different denominations and ideologies, and some of them might actually be confused about it. Some of them might be faking it. You know, like, the meaning of the left, the meaning of the right, anarchist, law-loving, you know, like, just don't be, like, be a good person. Okay, when I talk about there's no excuse for the Christian stuff, there isn't. Like, there are certain thought processes to where there's no excuse for. Okay? And this Christian thought process is one of them. So, I mean, there are a lot of different views, like, the different denominations and stuff, they might have some definition of the Christian process that might be different. But, like, I think you understand what I'm trying to say, that there are Christians that are like, that stuff's not excusable. Okay, saying that you are one of those things, your reasoning for saying that you are, like, it's just not excusable now. I'm going to stop there. So, okay, talking about the two parties, talking about religions. I'll go into the religions. I'll talk about the evidence. There's the Skeptics Annotated Bible, the BibViz website. There are resources to look through for, you know, contradictions, other stuff. So the Bible, I guess, sells like 19 million copies a year. This Skeptics Annotated Bible, which is like apparently like the most thorough skeptic, like, version, you know, with like examples of inaccuracies and stuff. It might sell. I think said it sells like a few hundred a year. So 19 million terrorist books a year, composed of like a few hundred books that explain, you know, in the passages that it's just horrible. So it's bad. And I'm not saying that the Skeptics Annotated Bible is like completely correct, but definitely has some stuff that's like accurate. So that's about it. Just talking about the religions of the parties, still identifying the Democratic Party as the, you know, the more dangerous party, even though they have more agnostics from what I'm seeing. It's just different. Okay. Like, the agnostics have a better path of support through the Republicans, just based on more so of having an inclination towards law and order being, like, actually instilled. So that's where you're going to want to put your vote. So what? There's that. Okay, just don't, with these false accusations, please don't mess with me. I am a nice person. Okay, I don't make assumptions. I'm not one of these other kinds of people. Okay, please don't mess with me like that.